So I want to start actually by talking about something that's touched on, I hadn't even introduced Will or Libby. How bad's that?
Well,
So we've got Abby Bennett back from PropellerNet, and we've got Will Waldron from Connected Free and Libby Windle from Connected Free as well, so thank you for joining us. So I want to touch on something that has been talked about everywhere today, certainly on this stage anyway, and that is the use of AI in PR. And I don't know if anyone saw Daniel's talk first thing this morning on this stage, but it was exciting and terrifying in equal measures, because he was essentially saying that if you haven't, I don't know, like half an hour's worth of vocals, so if you've been on YouTube or a podcast, he can deepfake your voice to say anything with relative ease. And I think there's obviously going to be some issues around AI, and I wondered how it sits within journalism and PR in terms of copyright and if it should be regulated or anything like that. I mean, what's your thoughts on it at the moment?
I could talk about AI in journalism for hours, so I won't bore you all. To go back to AI in journalism, just to say that this might surprise you or not, but we're talking about it. It's no longer taboo, right? Okay, there's lots of research happening in loads of newsrooms into AI, lots of investment going to be happening over the next 2 years. But 67% of our publishers in this country have been using some form of AI for years. So, like I say, it's not particularly new. And, you know, you mentioned brilliantly before about potential job losses in journalism, certainly with AI. This week, I think one of the biggest German tabloids has just let go of 200 members of staff, which is worrying because they are introducing a new AI platform which will do those 200 journalists, you know, do their work to a certain extent. However, as you said, they've got to then employ 200 people to put the work, you know, the words into AI. So there's a lot of unknown factors, but certainly there's a lot of good and bad in journalism with AI as well. I had to use it a few weeks ago whereby I used it as a data analysis tool. And what would have taken me 5 days to look into potential links around the coronavirus injection and Public Health England took 40 minutes. And I cannot tell you, I was literally looking at it, my eyes were like, oh, it was just incredible. But obviously, like you also say, you have to then verify a lot of those sources and do a lot of fact checking. So it's definitely got its place, but we don't know enough about it, do we? And copyright, as I mentioned in a different speech, a different chat with you a few days ago, there's a lot of legal cases at the moment involving copyright and AI, especially in journalism. And I think we're at a time now, in this time, unfortunately, where journalists have to be trusted. There's a lot of work to do around ethics and trust in journalism. So AI and journalism can work very well together, but we have to be responsible and know more about it and how to use it properly.
Yeah, and we talked about it from journalism, I suppose, but AI within PR, and we've talked about it a lot, but I mean, Abby, what's your thoughts in terms of how do you reckon you can use it to increase delivery of links, or?
I think we're using it at the moment in a very similar way to how you described in your talk, to be honest, almost using it as a point of inspiration, a springboard for those headlines, those ideas, that press release when you've got writer's block. I think everyone is still quite weary and cautious in terms of flies everywhere. Quite weary and cautious in terms of how we're using it at the moment. Who's to say how we're going to be using it in 3, 4, 5 years' time? But at the moment, it is sort of shortening those manual processes, and it is a really great place to sort of help with that inspiration.
Will, Libby, anything to add?
Yeah, we've been talking about this. I think don't let your creativity get stale with it. Don't be like the first port of call when you're getting a press release. It's my turn for the fly.
Yeah.
Or you're looking for some data. Use the team around you. You've got content teams, design teams, have input from them, and just use it as a little nudge in the right direction if you need the help.
Cool. And I suppose moving away from AI for a second, something that I get asked a lot of questions about is PR for, I suppose, difficult industries. Is there any industry that, I don't know, Liv, if you want to answer, that you think PR is impossible for?
Impossible, no, but tricky, yes. So, for example, we've done PR for a company that sells cable ties, and it was nothing to do with 50 Shades of Grey. I think maybe sectors with strict compliance teams and legal, because you've got so many different regulations that you need to abide by. So maybe whilst creative campaigns might work for some of those sectors, maybe not for all. So it's just a case of finding other niche ways to kind of build those results. So for example, thought leadership, whereby you can go to like trade press, business news, top tips. Perhaps if you've got like a retail client with loads of suppliers, you could use technical link back activity. And then again, like I said, anything that's happening internally with the business that you can then hit up the trade press with. So I think it's just a case of really digesting yourself within your business and then niche and learning what you can speak about if perhaps creative isn't the route to take.
Is there any industries that you would cover from a journalist perspective? Because one thing that we've seen across digital PR, and obviously I'm not going to name any names, but for example, casino brands will talk about, you know, the best places to buy a bottle of pop or whatever the most randomest stories are. Would that put you off covering a story?
I was literally about to say, actually, gambling, casinos have all got red flags, you know, in terms of regulation, ethics. We do have to be very careful. But there are some news brands that I work for who are less cautious than others. So, and also in terms of sort of campaigns really rather than areas, anything that is personal to a certain extent as well, like anything that's like National Walkie Dog Day, I'm just not interested. So, but I don't want to go off piece, but like you say, topics, certain types of campaigns, it's a pop-up, charity campaigns, it's an integrated social media campaign. I don't want to know, I just want to know what the story is for our consumers.
Yeah, okay. And I suppose this one's maybe one for you, Alex. We've touched on relevancy in PR, well, in the talk earlier. How are you looking at it? How are you trying to measure it? And I know it's a difficult one. I get it. I get there's no one solution, but what's kind of your thoughts on the measurement of it?
Yeah, I think obviously it's so important, so we should be measuring it, but at the same time there's no need to really overcomplicate it. Like if you're coming up with relevant ideas at that ideas stage, like every digital PR is going to be pitching to those relevant sort of publications where your target audience is going to be hanging out on. Obviously, when it comes to the actual measurement, you can be looking at the sections of the site that the coverage is sort of featured on and where that link is directing to. And for example, at PropellerNet, we use a lot of sort of like link gap analysis so that we're making sure that the links that we're getting are relevant to our clients' SEO strategy as well. So there's that sort of side of relevance. But I think there's no need to overcomplicate it because actually, if you're getting that good coverage where your client's target audience is hanging out, then that is kind of ticking the brief, basically.
I think you got a good point on the whole link gap analysis as well, because it's about looking at the SEO side of it as well. So I did some analysis the other day for a brand, and it was around about no follow and followed links. And what it showcased was actually the more no follow links was higher rankings. The real reason was because the people with more followed links were buying links. That was the main reason behind it. But I think you need to have that level of SEO insight as well. And I want to talk about face-to-face meetings, because it's 2023, we've all gone on holiday, or I recently have, and it's not a spray tan, by the way, everyone keeps saying that to me today. So we're all going on holiday, we're all going back outside and seeing people. Is there a need for face-to-face meetings anymore?
Absolutely.
Yeah?
100%. Yeah, I think it's so important to build that relationship with your clients face-to-face. Obviously, if you've got clients overseas, like you won't be able to see them on a regular basis, but at C3, we try to meet our clients face-to-face on a quarterly basis. And I think from my perspective, if perhaps one quarter performance is taking a bit of a downward spiral, I always feel like it's better communicating those reasons why face-to-face, because it comes across better, and you can then tell your client what the solution is going to be and how you can work together to kind of combat that. So I do think, yeah, they're 100% needed.
Completely agree. I think getting them on your side can help in tough decisions if you've had a hard month and you've not hit KPIs. If you have a big creative idea and you really need the client on your side, getting that personal bond and almost having them as a friend is really going to help you deliver the risky part of it. And I think you need
brainstorms as well. We do a lot of brainstorms with our clients, and sometimes it can be quite tricky because they'll come up with these ideas and you're like, oh, that won't work for PR. But it's really good to get them on side with that, because then they might be like, oh, we've got this internal data you could use to back that up. You can really elevate it, and then they're bought in from the start. Yeah. So then that really helps as well.
We'll also kind of learn your client's personality. They might be a bit of an introvert and they don't really want to meet you for a coffee. They probably don't want to meet me, I'll be honest. So having a virtual call might work best for them. You just need to make sure your meetings are slick and you've got agendas, and you be as personable as you can on the call.
Yeah, I think obviously working remote has allowed us to work with people all over the world, which is great. Certainly at Connected Free, we've got literally clients in Canada, Australia, Germany, and the US now. But I think face-to-face meetings will just never go away. And it's good for the team. I mean, they get trips abroad now, I suppose. But yeah. Lee, I want to ask you a question. Actually, I was going to ask you at the end of your talk, but I want to ask. So, if there is a specific PR who just continuously sends you crap, right? Like just terrible stories. It could be whatever, casino brands buying cans of pop kind of things. you talked about blacklisting people. Is that a thing? Or if they did come with a good story, would you still take it, or would that trust be lost?
No, and I've blocked people on Twitter, but I haven't actually blacklisted people. I'm not that mean. Oh, sorry. But, however, I do know a lot of my colleagues who have literally, and actually there was one specific agency which was based in the Northwest, and I won't name names. It was quite a long time ago, but it was just one disaster after another. And there were some legal ramifications on the back of something which a colleague of mine had picked up and ran with, and we thought it was verified and checked and all the rest of it. So unfortunately, they were so blacklisted, so to speak, you know. And actually, sometimes it's not our decision. It's an editorial decision or the publisher's overall decision. And I have to say, having worked and work for various tabloids, especially way back when the News of the World did exist, you know, there were certain powers that be that would come down onto the newsroom floor and they'd want to know where that story was from. And if I said a specific PR agency and that person didn't like it, then we knew about it and that story was pulled. That's out of my hands. So sometimes the powers that be dictate a blacklist or not a blacklist.
Yeah. Do exclusives still work better for you? Yeah, is that still a thing?
Absolutely. But I think we are quite savvy to the word exclusive. You know, long gone are the days where someone would tell me an exclusive and we'd go, yeah, that's great, without verifying that and actually having that relationship to build trust. Because, again, you know, we've had fingers being bitten here where people said you've got an exclusive and then, you know, 1 minute past midnight, a rival news brand have had the same story but with a different angle billed to them as an exclusive. So you've got to think, because that really annoys journalists, because we do take things in good faith.
So one thing I was speaking to somebody about exclusives a while ago. One of my friends is a journalist at Reach PLC, and it's when somebody sells an exclusive, do you expect it as an exclusive? Or because some people do it for like 24 hours, right? And then they'll, I don't know, you get it on the Wednesday morning, Thursday morning, it's out to every...
Yeah, and I think a lot of the time we have legal contracts around exclusives or make things as legally binding or as contractual binding as possible. And again, it depends on the relationship that we've got. You know, it's a two-way chain of communication, and I think it's paramount to make sure that if we are putting trust in you to give us an exclusive, it is an exclusive, and sometimes it can just be for a certain length of time. And let's face it, I was saying earlier actually to somebody that an exclusive these days, come on, you're getting it out there online within seconds, someone else has picked it up, and yes, they might reference where they've got it from, but what is an exclusive actually? Let's, you know, think about that as well.
Yeah. And we talked about hyperlinks as well. So is there anything that would make, I know you said it's sometimes editorial, you know, chosen, so the regional paper you mentioned obviously encouraged hyperlinks, but some nationals didn't. Is there any certain stories that any certain types of stories that you would be more encouraged to hyperlink to than others?
It depends if somebody was paying for that, okay? But not really, no. I mean, I always do check a hyperlink and I check the back website. You know, we go through and make certain checks depending what that is, more so if there's ethical issues around that or if there's legal regulation around that specific brand or business. But I wouldn't say so, no.
So one thing that we've seen in PR as well, and this one's probably for you, Abby, is like, well, I've seen in PR, just run out there, is that like your biggest style campaigns have dwindled down a little bit because, you know, people would be doing large-scale campaigns which would take time, resource, effort, and potentially months to create, and you might have one outreach angle. So people are seeming to do smaller kind of campaigns. Is there anything that you see, any campaigns or strategies that you see just becoming more and more unsuccessful? Or successful, if it's on its head?
Yeah, I think like you were saying, the sort of bigger interactive formats are working maybe less effectively as with the news cycle is getting quicker. So a lot of these sort of reactive and sort of press office stories where you can just almost like what Lee was saying in her talk as well around like getting those quick sort of headlines and stories out within a press office story rather than taking an 8-week lead time to produce something that is still having those sort of 3 bullet points headlines. So I think those sort of quicker turnaround stories are definitely working quite well for the industry at the moment. I think SEO answer, I think it really depends on the client and their sort of goals, because different types of content that are going to build different types of links are going to work like better or worse depending on that goal. So yeah, sorry for that annoying us.
No, it just made me laugh because I put something on LinkedIn the other day and I put "it depends" in my LinkedIn, and loads of people slid into my DM saying PR's favourite word. It depends. And I suppose, do you have any tips for, because obviously campaigns are not always successful, right? I mean, somebody could pick me to the post, and news agenda could change. There's so many things that could be thrown in our way. Do we have any tips for what to do in that scenario?
I think maybe using your client's first-party data, if you can, you've got approval to do so, because then you're giving something to journalists that's completely resonates with your brand, and no one else can give them that data. On top of that as well, I think case studies are working really, really well for us at the moment. So an example would include, we had a piece on top tips to avoid mold in your home, and we just wasn't getting cut through. There were similar stories out there. So one of our PR strategists was just like, oh, one of my friends had a mold issue in their home, and they ended up bulking out, I think it was over like £800 because it ruined all of their suits. So he was like, could we get them as a case study? And she was like, probably. We got them as a case study, we got a picture of them, and we went out to the National with this picture being like, local Leeds couple fork out over £800 because of damages to their suit with mould. Here's our expert tips to avoid that happening. So it kind of correlated two new angles, and from that we got links on like the Express, the Daily Mirror. So that's just kind of a different way we re-angled it and kind of added a more real life element to it.
Yeah, I think insights and expertise are really useful now, and it can be really simple as well, just newsjacking, and you don't have to put too much work in it for a journalist to add an extra bit of opinion into their piece. So it's a simple, not a big creative, overarching, huge campaign. It's just a simple approach that you can get in.
Cool. And is there any tips on standing out of the crowd? Because every year you will have, I mean, you could literally write down the stories you're guaranteed to see, the odds of it being a white Christmas, I don't know, who's going to win Love Island, what to do with your dog when there's a heat wave, all that kind of stuff, right? I mean, there's the standard stuff we see every single year, right? How do you stand out from that? Okay, so if you have a client where it's almost very natural for them to be talking about that, but you know that the competition is going to be rife, how do we stand out in terms of creativity?
I think standing out again, it would come back to what I was saying before about, again, can you utilise your client's first party data, because that is going to make you stand out, because again, you're giving journalists something that no other brand can give, because that data is personal to your brand and to your client. I think outside of that, perhaps utilising maybe anything you're seeing on social media in terms of trends. So one thing that we do is we speak to our social media manager. So for example, the other week he flagged that this influencer, it wasn't an ad, I think she'd done a post on stair runners, and her audience were going mad for it. The comments were brilliant. So what we did was we thought, could we utilise that for PR purposes? So kind of get that influencer content, put it in some top tips, like with a trend angle, and send it out to the media. And that just showcases how we've seen something on social media for our brand, and we've taken that and used it to build those PR results.
And one for you, Lee, before we finish soon. I think I was speaking to a guy who's a journalist. It was a while back, like a year and a bit ago. And I don't know if I got this information right, but he was telling me that to a certain degree, he was getting not KPI'd on the traffic that the site was getting, but he was having to target obviously stories that were not clickbait, but high traffic drivers. Because obviously the more traffic you get to a site, theoretically the more advertising that site can get. What is the KPIs of a journalist? Or is it just, like you said, 110, I think, pieces of COVID coverage or something like that?
It very much depends on the brand. What I would say to that is sometimes I'll work at a regional, and whilst I am on my desk typing away on my keyboard, I get a drop down with algorithm words that have just changed in the last hour. So it's incredibly frustrating. Then I have to re-nose the top of the copy, say if it was a health story, top tips, for example, a light story like that. It just very much depends on where you are working and that particular title. There's not really one set answer to that. But I was actually going to say earlier, just bear that in mind, that algorithms and SEO, we're really hot on it, and we get told which words we can put in and which words we can't. So just bear that in mind as well.
That's really interesting, actually, because we could use that for our selling. And then I suppose, just before we finish off, and I suppose it's a question for all of you, really, the top challenges that are coming. I mean, I touched on AI, I touched on social listening, I touched on search changing. Top challenges in PR, Will, what do you reckon they are?
Personally, at the minute, I'm finding anything that has a physical product, a client with a physical product, creating content that is the fine line between editorial and advertorial. So if it's a little bit too salesy, the journalist just isn't going to accept it straight away. So it's just being careful with making sure it's creative and insightful, but it's not too self-promotive. So yeah, that's a bit of a challenge at the minute for me.
I think mine would come down to, there are now so many PRs out there and less journalists. Like, a lot of traditional PR agencies are now dipping their toes in digital. So I think our biggest challenge, what biggest opportunity is just to make sure that whenever we are reporting to our clients, we are always showcasing the wider value than just links, links, links. So whether that's like the visibility of the traffic, the uplifting keywords, the engagement, sales, if we have access to that data, just to kind of go beyond that bigger picture, to really showcase to our clients, here's exactly how these results are going beyond just numbers.
Yeah, I would echo what Libby said, but also the types of links that are being given at the moment. So feel like there's a lot more like affiliates out there, a lot more non-links. So trying to get those sort of high quality links while also making it relevant, while also making sure you're getting the right types of links. That's quite hard to balance at the moment, whilst there's also less journalists as well. It's a tough time out there.
What's the biggest challenges from a journalist perspective?
I think it's actually in the journalist newsroom and in the environment, to be honest, apart from avoiding redundancies left, right and centre. But, thinking positive, it's probably the online safety for journalists, and also moderating comments from the public, because that has been horrific and is at an all-time high. A lot of the resource that, news outlets have is actually going into legal areas, around the comments that are posted, and hate crime actually. So, changing times, challenging times.
Yeah. Well, look, I think that's everything for now. It's come up to the time, but I just want to say massive thanks to Will, Libby, Abby, and Lee. So just give them a round of applause. Thank you very much.